She was sold for being blind, until the Alpha King claimed her. The marketplace was alive with chaos. Rain fell in cold, relentless sheets, turning the cobblestones slick and dark. Lanterns flickered in the wind, their light reflected in puddles like tiny, trembling stars. Merchants shouted, trying to sell their wares over the din of clashing voices. And in the middle of it all, a young woman stood, silent, her hands trembling slightly as she felt the coarse rope binding her wrists. Elara was blind. Her world was not one of sight but of sound, scent, and subtle vibrations. She could sense a man's approach by the echo of his footsteps, the sway of his breath. She could tell a smile from the way a voice softened. And tonight, in the rain-soaked marketplace, she felt fear and greed ripple through the crowd like a living thing. Her mother had sold her here, trading her daughter for a few coins and a promise of survival. Elara's chest tightened as the memory of her mother's tearful face flashed in her mind. It was a choice made in desperation, in hunger and hopelessness. Yet even as betrayal stung, a quiet fire of defiance burned within her. She would not give the crowd the satisfaction of her tears. "Next!" The auctioneer's voice cut through the storm, harsh and commanding. "Blind girl!" Worthless to most, but perhaps a bargain for someone powerful. A ripple of laughter followed. People whispered that she was cursed, that no one could sell anything valuable with such a flaw. Yet there was something about her that stirred curiosity. Even in darkness, she radiated a quiet strength that drew attention like moths to a flame. Elara felt the crowd press closer, the smell of wet leather and smoke from torches mingling in her nose. She could hear their excitement, the low murmur of speculation, the clinking of coins in eager hands. Each sound painted a picture her eyes could never see. Then, a silence fell over the marketplace like a sudden shadow. Her heart skipped a beat. The crowd parted and a presence came forward, heavy and commanding. It was a presence that did not need sight to be recognized. Elara knew, without opening eyes, that this person was different from the others. Powerful, dangerous, yet undeniably magnetic. "Step aside," a deep voice commanded. It was calm but carried the weight of authority, the kind that made people stop mid-step. Elara's senses sharpened. The air seemed to thrum with energy. She could feel the vibration of his footsteps on the cobblestones, steady and deliberate. There was no fear in him, only certainty. "You will not touch her," he added, and the crowd instinctively recoiled. Elara's pulse raced. She sensed the fascination in his voice, the subtle curiosity. Not many had ever treated her as a person rather than a commodity. Yet even in that recognition there was something darker lurking beneath, a shadow of power and danger she could feel but not yet understand. The auctioneer's voice trembled as he addressed the man. This is a blind girl, Your Grace. She has no value except—" "She has value," the man interrupted, his voice icy now, commanding attention. "And she will come with me." A hush fell over the marketplace. People whispered among themselves, astonished and fearful. The man's words were like a decree, a force stronger than the storm itself. Elara felt a mixture of fear and relief wash over her. Fear, because she did not know what awaited her. Relief, because someone saw her worth, even if she could not see them. The man stepped closer. Elara could feel his presence like a wall of heat and authority. "You will not fear me," he said softly, almost a whisper meant only for her. "I will not harm you. Not unless you give me reason." His words were strange and unsettling, yet there was a strange comfort in them. Somehow, they reached deep inside her, stirring feelings she had never known: curiosity, wonder, and a flutter of hope. The crowd began to murmur again, some bowing their heads in respect, others glaring with jealousy. The auctioneer looked like a man who had just witnessed the impossible. "Yes, Your Grace," he stammered, his gavel falling uselessly. Elara felt the rough hands of servants gripping her arms, ready to lead her away. She resisted the urge to struggle. Her senses told her this man's intentions were not cruel. Somehow she trusted him. It was a strange, dangerous trust, but it was all she had. As they moved through the wet streets, the sound of rain on their cloaks mingling with distant thunder, Elara's mind raced. Who was this man who claimed her so suddenly? Why had he chosen her among all the others? And what did he see that she could not? The Alpha King's palace loomed ahead, a fortress of stone and shadows. Its high towers vanished into the stormy sky, and the air grew heavier with the scent of old magic, burning torches, and something ancient and untamed. Elara felt the weight of history pressing down, the whispers of countless lives long past. Inside the palace, silence enveloped her. The halls were vast, and she felt her smallness keenly. Every step echoed, every sound magnified. She sensed the presence of the Alpha King before she even heard his footsteps. He was near, patient, his gaze unseen but piercing, as if he could perceive the world in ways beyond sight. "You are not a prisoner here," he said, his voice low and commanding yet strangely gentle. "You are under my protection." "But you must learn the rules of this place, quickly." Elara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Protection and danger seemed to walk hand in hand with this man. He was like a storm, unpredictable, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Days passed, each one stretching endlessly. Elara learned the rhythms of the palace, the soft steps of servants, the hush of scholars in the library, the distant rumble of the council chambers. She began to feel the strange pulse of life in the fortress, the magic that lingered in its stones, and the weight of the Alpha King's presence that never left her side. Kalen, that was his name, watched her closely. He was patient, meticulous, and enigmatic. He allowed her small freedoms but tested her courage in ways she did not fully understand. And though he was stern, she sensed a hidden warmth in him. Glimpses of a man capable of tenderness beneath the layers of authority and shadow. One evening, as lightning split the sky and rain lashed the windows, Elara wandered into the palace courtyard. She was drawn to the sound of rushing water from the fountain, its spray catching the faint glimmers of lightning. The storm was wild, but she felt strangely alive in it, as if the chaos mirrored something within her. "You move well, for one who cannot see," Kalen said, his voice coming from the shadows. She did not startle. She had expected him. "I do not see, but I know," she replied, her voice steady. "I feel more than many who have eyes." There was a pause, a rare moment of silence where only the storm and their breathing existed. Kalen stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of him, the intensity of his gaze, though she could not meet it. "You are different," he murmured. "Not weak, not broken, not a burden." Elara felt her heart tighten. Few had ever spoken to her this way, fewer still with honesty. She wanted to ask why he chose her, why he claimed her in the marketplace, as if he had been searching for her all his life. But the words stuck in her throat. The wind howled, shaking the stone walls, and thunder rolled across the sky. A shadow flickered at the edge of the courtyard, a figure watching from afar. Fear gripped her for the first time since arriving at the palace. Kalen's hand found hers, firm and steady. "You are safe," he said, "for now. But there are those who would see you gone, who would exploit your weakness, if they knew of it."
Elara nodded, though a part of her wondered what darkness had followed her from the marketplace, what secrets her mother's choice had unleashed.
The storm intensified, rain hammering the courtyard, yet in that moment, Elara felt an unexpected clarity. She may have been sold, abandoned, and feared by many, but she was not powerless, not while he stood by her, not while she could feel the pulse of the world around her. And as lightning illuminated the courtyard, she sensed it, a promise, a warning, and a truth she could not yet name. Her life had changed forever, and the Alpha King had claimed more than her body or her presence. He had claimed her fate. The palace was a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. Every corridor seemed longer than it should be, every doorway heavier than its frame suggested. Elara moved carefully, her hands trailing along the cold stone walls. She counted her steps, memorized the subtle shifts of air, the faint creak of hinges, the distant drip of water from the storm-soaked roof above. Every sound, every vibration, painted a picture her eyes could never see. Kalen followed silently. His presence was a constant, though he allowed her space, never touching her unless necessary. Yet she could feel him in the air around her, the careful placement of his steps, the heat of his body, the unspoken awareness that he was always watching, always guarding. "You will learn to trust your other senses," he said one evening as they walked through a long corridor lit by flickering torches. His voice was low, patient, and carried the weight of command. "Sight is not everything. In this palace, knowing the unseen is more valuable than seeing the obvious." Alara nodded. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he truly wanted to protect her. Yet the fear she carried from the marketplace lingered, a faint shadow that clung to her even in the palace's warmth. "I feel... she said quietly. "I feel people's moods, their intentions. Sometimes it is too much. I do not know what is real and what is not." Kalen's footsteps slowed. He stopped beside her, and she could feel his gaze upon her, sharp yet oddly gentle. "Your gift is rare," he said. "You sense truths that others cannot. That is why I chose you. Not because you are blind, but because you can see what others refuse to notice." The words startled her. Most people treated her blindness as a weakness, but Kalen's words were different. They were not pity, nor were they condescending. They were acknowledgement, recognition that she was more than the world believed her to be. For the next days, Alara began exploring the palace more freely. Servants guided her when necessary, but she insisted on learning the halls herself. She wanted to know the palace as she knew the streets of her village before being sold, by sound, by scent, by the feel of stone beneath her fingertips. It was in the library that she first felt the depth of the palace's secrets. The room was vast, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of old parchment. Shelves climbed toward the ceiling, stacked with books bound in leather and chains, containing knowledge forbidden or forgotten. "Do not touch everything," Kalen warned as she ran her hands along a shelf. "Some things here are dangerous. Knowledge has weight, and some truths are heavier than any sword." Alara smiled faintly. "I have carried heavy truths before," she said, thinking of her mother's sacrifice, of the marketplace, of the cruel eyes that had measured her worth. Kalen's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Perhaps, but this weight is different. It will challenge not only your mind, but your soul." Days passed with lessons that were never easy. Kalen guided her in ways both subtle and strict. He tested her patience, her instincts, her courage. Sometimes he left her alone in rooms filled with strange sounds, asking her to identify them, to navigate without faltering. Other times he would appear silently, startling her only to remind her that danger often came unseen. Despite the strictness, there were moments of quiet intimacy. In the garden she could hear the water of the fountains and the rustle of leaves, and he would sit with her in silence, neither speaking yet connected through presence alone. Sometimes she felt the warmth of his hand when he guided her past an obstacle, sometimes the firmness of his voice when she hesitated. But palace life was not without danger. Whispers reached her. The servants spoke of nobles who resented her, who saw her as an interloper, a distraction to the Alpha King. They plotted, subtly at first, then more boldly, their words reaching her ears despite her blindness. One night she overheard a plot while passing near the council chamber. Two voices, low and conspiratorial, spoke of removing her from the palace. "She has no right here," one said. "The Alpha King favors her too much. She will ruin the balance." Alara froze. Fear surged, but she did not panic. She had learned to move silently, to listen, to anticipate. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall and listened to every detail, every step that came and went. Later, Kalen found her in the garden. His expression was unreadable, as if he had known all along. "They do not see you as you are," he said, his voice barely above the sound of the wind. "But I do. You must not be afraid of them, only of what they might force you to face if they succeed." Alara wanted to ask him more, to demand answers, yet the fear she had overheard remained a tight knot in her chest. Instead, she nodded, trusting him enough to follow his guidance even without understanding fully. One evening, while the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within her, Ilara wandered into a lesser-used wing of the palace. She was drawn to a small, circular chamber, its walls lined with mirrors. At first she thought it empty, but then she felt a vibration in the air, a strange magical hum. Her hands touched one mirror. It was cold, smoother than any glass she had known. A shiver ran through her as she felt something stir within it. The mirror responded to her touch. A vision appeared, fleeting yet vivid. She saw herself, not blind, moving freely, walking with confidence and power. Around her swirled shadows, some threatening, some protective. She felt a surge of emotion, awe, fear, and longing all at once. Kalen's voice sounded behind her, gentle yet commanding. "You have found the mirror of truth. It reveals not what is, but what might be. And what could be if the soul chooses courage over fear." Ilara's hands trembled. I can see myself," she whispered. "But I do not understand." Kalen stepped closer, careful not to touch her. "It is not about understanding. It is about choice. Your mother's bargain brought you here, yes. But this is something that belongs to you alone. You can shape it." For a moment she felt hope and a pang of fear. To have power, even just the potential of it, was intoxicating. But with it came responsibility, danger, and the unknown. Days turned into weeks. Elara's senses sharpened further. She could anticipate movements before they happened, feel the emotions of those around her, and navigate spaces others would stumble through. Kalen continued to guide her, often in ways that frustrated her, but also pushed her to grow stronger. Yet the palace was not immune to danger. The conspirators grew bolder. One night, as Ilara walked alone in the hall near the council chamber, she sensed a shadow detach itself from the wall. She froze, listening. The shadow moved with intent, a predator in the silence. Kalen appeared from the darkness, his steps silent, his presence overwhelming. Without a word, he intercepted the shadow, revealing it to be one of the nobles sent to harm her. The man's expression changed from confidence to fear in an instant, for Kalen's authority was absolute. "You are fortunate to survive this night," Kalen said quietly, guiding Ilara back toward the main halls. "But fortune alone will not protect you forever. You must learn to defend yourself in ways beyond sight." Ilara felt a surge of determination. She would not be a helpless pawn in the palace games. She would not be defined by her blindness, by her mother's choices, or by the fear of others. She would grow strong. She would learn. And she would survive. Not just for herself, but for Kalen, who had placed his trust in her, and perhaps in ways she did not yet understand, his hope. Later, alone in her chamber, Ilara traced her fingers over the walls, the furniture, and the small treasures Kalen had allowed her. She thought of the mirror and the vision it had shown her, herself, strong and unafraid. She thought of the conspirators and the shadow in the hall. And she thought of Kalen, whose presence was at once terrifying and comforting. Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakable. It carried through the stone walls of the palace, reaching her ears like a secret from the past. "Ilara!" the voice breathed. A name she had not heard in years. A name that belonged to someone from the marketplace. Someone whose path had followed her even into the palace.
Her heart raced.
She knew, without doubt, that danger had arrived at the gates of her new life. The Alpha King could protect her, but only if she was ready to face what was coming. The palace was quieter than usual that evening. A heavy tension hung in the air, almost as if the stones themselves held their breath. Ilara moved carefully through the halls, guided by the faint flicker of torchlight and the subtle sound of Kalen's footsteps behind her. She had grown accustomed to navigating the palace alone, but tonight felt different, heavier, charged with unease. She paused outside the council chamber, sensing whispers from within. Two voices, low and urgent, carried through the door. She could not see, but she understood enough. There was plotting, scheming against her and the Alpha King. Her pulse quickened. The conspirators were bolder now. They were no longer content with shadows and murmurs. Elara backed away silently, her fingers tracing the cold stone wall. She felt Kaelin's presence solid behind her, steady and protective. "You sense them," he said softly, reading her tension. His voice was calm, yet carried an edge of warning. "Do not let them provoke fear. They can manipulate words, but they cannot touch what you cannot give them." Elara nodded. "I know," she whispered, though her chest tightened. "But they are dangerous, and I feel their hatred for me." Kaelin's gaze, though unseen, seemed to pierce her entirely. "Then we must be ready. Tonight you will learn more than whispers and shadows. You will see what your gift truly can do." Later in the sanctuary of the palace library, Kaelin showed her a section she had not been allowed to enter before. Scrolls and books bound in thick leather and metal seemed to hum with latent power. Some contained spells, others recorded ancient prophecies. "Your mother's bargain did not end with the marketplace," Kaelin said, his tone grave. "It set forces in motion that reach beyond the kingdom. There are those who would use you or harm you because of what you carry within."
Elara's fingers traced a small leather-bound tome.
She could feel the energy emanating from it like a heartbeat pulsing beneath her touch. "What do you mean?" "What do I carry?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You have a gift," Kaelin explained. "Not just the ability to sense what others cannot. There is a power in you that is rare, one that can alter destinies. But with it comes danger. Not everyone who touches the power of fate survives." Fear mingled with curiosity. Elara had always known she was different, had always sensed what others could not. But to think it could change the course of kingdoms, it was almost too much to bear. Days passed, and the tension within the palace grew. The nobles plotting against her became bolder, testing Kaelin's patience, seeking any weakness in the woman he had claimed. Elara trained herself, learning to rely on her senses not just to survive, but to anticipate threats. She could feel when someone entered her presence, hear the slight catch in a breath that betrayed intention, detect the faintest shifts in energy that hinted at emotion. One stormy night, a message arrived, delivered by a hooded figure in silence. Kaelin read it swiftly, his expression darkening. "It is from her past," he said, placing the parchment in her hands. "Someone who believes they own a claim on you. They will not rest until they have confronted what you have become." Elara's hand shook. The words on the page spoke of secrets, of debts unpaid, of dangers lurking beyond the palace walls. She realized that her mother's choice had not only brought her here, but had tied her to forces she had not yet faced. Kalain stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Whatever comes, you will not face it alone. You must trust yourself and trust me." The following days were a whirlwind. The palace grew tense with the presence of the shadow from her past. Couriers arrived with veiled threats, messages whispered in the hallways, and rumors that stirred fear among the servants. Elara's training intensified. Kaelin guided her not just to sense danger, but to confront it. He taught her to trust her instincts, to act without hesitation, to recognize friend from foe not by sight, but by the subtle truths her senses revealed. Then, one night, it happened. The conspirators made their move. A trusted courtier, someone who had served Kaelin for years, approached Elara under the guise of guidance. They whispered false information, attempting to manipulate her trust, to turn her against the Alpha King without her realizing. Elara sensed something was wrong. The courtier's voice carried a hidden tension, a contradiction in the cadence that spoke of deception. She hesitated, then moved carefully, guided by the instincts Kaelin had honed in her. Kaelin appeared silently, as always, his presence overwhelming. The courtier froze, caught in the act. Kaelin's voice was calm but carried authority that crushed hesitation. "Your loyalty is questioned," he said. "Do not test the patience of those who see more than you realize." The man's expression shifted from confidence to fear, and Alara realized the danger had been closer than she imagined. Yet she also understood something new. The palace was a place of shadows, yes, but she was no longer defenseless. She had learned to move through them with awareness, with presence, with strength. Later, alone in her chamber, Alara reflected on the events. The betrayal stung, but it also clarified her understanding. Trust could be a weapon, as could deception. She must be vigilant, not just against enemies but against appearances. The palace was a test, and she was learning to navigate it. Kalen, too, was not untouched by the evening's events. His expression remained stoic, but Alara could sense the weight of responsibility he bore. Protecting her was not just about keeping her safe. It was about guiding her through dangers that could unmake her, or him. As the storm raged outside, Alara felt drawn to the mirror once more. She approached it, tracing the smooth surface with her fingers. A faint shimmer appeared, and the vision returned. Herself not blind, standing tall and confident, a force of light amidst shadow. But this time, the vision changed. Among the shadows lurked figures she did not recognize, dark shapes that seemed to reach for her, threatening to drag her back into fear and uncertainty. Her heart raced. She knew these were more than illusions. They were warnings, glimpses of the dangers yet to come. Kalen stepped behind her, his hand brushing her arm lightly. "Do not fear what you see," he said. "The visions show possibilities, not certainties. You have the power to choose your path, to confront what comes with courage." Alara swallowed, her mind whirling with questions and fear. Could she truly face what lay ahead? Could she protect herself and the man who had claimed her from forces she did not yet understand? Then came a knock at her door. A servant entered, her voice trembling. "A visitor from your past," she said, glancing nervously at Kalen. Alara's heart skipped. She had sensed this moment coming, but now it was real. The figure from the marketplace, the one who had whispered threats and carried secrets, had arrived at the palace. Kalen moved swiftly, positioning himself between Alara and the door. "Do not fear," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The door opened slowly. A tall figure stepped inside, shadowed by the storm outside. The air grew colder, charged with tension. Alara could feel every step, every intention, every emotion radiating from this visitor. The figure spoke, their voice carrying both recognition and challenge. "Alara," they said, "it seems fate has brought us together once more. But this time, you are not alone."
Alara's pulse raced.
The past had arrived at the gates of her present, bringing danger, secrets, and questions that demanded answers. She realized the journey she had begun, one of trust, courage, and growth, was about to be tested in ways she could not yet predict. Kalen's hand found hers, firm and steady. "You are ready," he said softly, his voice both a promise and a warning. "Together we will confront this. But know this, the path ahead will demand everything of you, and nothing will remain as it was." Alara nodded, her fingers tightening around his. She felt the storm within her mirror vision, and the storm outside the palace as one. She understood now that her life was no longer her own. It belonged to the palace, to Kalen, and to the forces that had been set in motion long before she was born. And as the visitors stepped fully into the room, their eyes glinting with purpose, Alara knew that nothing would ever be the same again.